right, quick video today. I wanted to show you guys a new tool in my firewood arsenal. And I'm trying to get to a point on my homestead where, yes, I've used a lot of resources to get this to where it is. And I still have some more resources to use in order to get to where I want to be. But the ultimate plan and foundation of where I want my homestead to go is boiled down to a redundancy where basically my family could survive without electricity or anything outside of what we can use, and super low tech. Basically, I want to boil everything down to the redundancy plan of, it could be a time, like we've got all this nice off-grid technology here. We use a lot of, fairly new things, but we could lose all of those at some point. Let's say there's an EMP, though it's not a thing I'm concerned about at all, but you never know. Plan for the worst and hope for the best, as they say. And this firewood thing I'm going to show you today is kind of along those lines of thinking. And just to kind of expound upon that a little bit more, where I'd like to be eventually with my homestead is that I could run one fire and I could cook with that heat. I could heat water with that heat, and I could heat my home with that heat. Thus, you almost have everything you need to survive, especially in winter. And I want that to be with firewood because I live on a large acreage where I have literally a lifetime of firewood in the 40 acres that I have. And just from cleaning up the forest and thinning things out, giving the bigger trees more space, I could harvest firewood here for my entire life, and then my children will be able to do the same. With good land steward practices, we can actually do that. It's nothing new. It's very possible. And I want to have a really good system with firewood so that it's minimal work or as little work as possible, and can eventually be boiled down to just hand tools that don't even require petroleum. So just to kind of open the lens a little bit here, where I've been, I have this cube system with my firewood, and I move these cubes around with my skid steer. And it's all well and good, and it makes it really convenient because then I have to handle firewood less. And what I've been doing up until this point and up until this new update that I'm going to show you here and explain a little bit further in a minute, is that when I harvest firewood, I take some trees down somewhere on my property, and then I set up a station there with my skid steer. I'll bring my skid steer over there, and I will carry one of these cubes. And these are just made with 2x4s. Some guys use IBC totes. Ben Falk does that actually, and it's very practical if you can get those things. And I haven't been able to get them for cheap enough to justify it. It's been cheap enough for me to make these out of scrap 2x4s that I have left around from concrete forms. And that's literally what all these are made of. A 48 inch by 48 inch pallet, and then 2x4s all around them to make a cube. And one thing I'm going to be adding soon is a roof on this. In fact, that's what Ben Falk does. And it's a way better system than what I have, where I've just been putting scrap plywood on and then tarps. And it's just not great. Having a single roof for each one would be so much better. But what I do is we have a queue of logs somewhere on the property. And then so they've all been fallen, and they've been limbed basically. So they're just logs. And then we go and we buck them up into rounds, and we split them right there. So I bring my chopping block and my splitting maul, and I go down to that where those logs are. They get bucked and split and put into these cubes right away. So they've only been really handled. I cut the round, pick up the round, put it on the chopping block, split it, and then handle each of those pieces again to go to one of these cubes. And from there, what I've been doing is I come with the skid steer with my forks, I pick up that cube, and I bring that cube to the back of my cabin over here. And you can see there's one there. And that's all well and good. And that means I'm really only handling that wood twice, and then the third time to go into the firebox, and that's it. And that's actually, no, that's not true. I bring it from the cube into the house, and I had a little thing like this next to the firewood station. And I had this kind of crappy metal one that I bought from the hardware store that was just junk that just fell apart. and I decided to just make my own, but make them so that a dolly can move them. And so by doing this, I can skip a machine move and I can skip a hand move. So instead of moving this cube with the machine to the cabin and then having to hand bomb that out into the house every day to do my small stack for the day, I can now just come here every 2 days and hand bomb it into here, and I can wheel this thing right into the house, and it goes right next to my wood stove, so that I skip a handling basically, and I can bring it right into the house. And so all these are just basically, they hold one row of 16-inch firewood, and they're just scabbed together with crappy scrap 2x4s that I had. Bit of plywood. I like plywood on the back. It makes the whole thing really rigid. And I started doing that with these as well, though some of these older ones that I have don't have it, but once I empty them out, I'll put it on, because it just gives that much more rigidity. Even still, if you can have a bit of plywood around the sides too, one big piece on the back and then some on the sides there, it makes them last longer. I used to stack these too, and I don't like doing that. It's a pain in the butt. It makes it harder for them to cover, and I want to make permanent roofs for them, so I just kind of lay them this way. And each one of these cubes is a half cord exactly, because a full cord is 48-inch by 48-inch by 8 feet long. And so these are exactly a half cord or 3 face cords. You know, people get really into the firewood terminology. I find it somewhat confusing, but with one of these, I come and I just bring it right over to these cubes, and I just wheel this out. It means I've got to have a little path in the snow, not a big deal. And then I just hand bomb this in here, and then from here, this goes right next to my stove, and then it goes right into the fire. So I'm really reducing my labor, even by not using my skid steer, because then I don't have to go and hand bomb stuff in every day from the outside. This lasts me about, so far, 36 to 48 hours of firewood. And it's 20 inches inside, 16 inches deep, because it holds one row of firewood. Typical firewood piece is 16 inches. And they are about 5 feet tall. So 16 by 20 by 5 feet. And and I just wheel it with my dolly, and it's great. And it's a little heavy when it's fully loaded, but it's not difficult to do. And it is really convenient. And so I have one for my garage and greenhouse over there, and I only burn less than half the fire, probably a third of the firewood that I burn for the cabin right now, because that building is a lot more efficient because it's new and we don't live in there. I'm only in there to work throughout the day, so I just kind of keep it warm during the day and don't really care about it at night. It's very well insulated anyway, so it holds the heat quite well, whereas the cabin is super inefficient. We haven't renovated it because, what's the point? We're moving into our house soon, so I'm not worried about that. But I will eventually insulate that better, and then it will have it'll be so much more efficient. Right now we burn about 6 cords in a winter to heat my garage, partially the greenhouse, not much though, and the cabin. And so once we're in the house and we live in a super efficient house, I imagine I'll only be burning half that if we're just burning it in the house with the wood stove we're going to have in there. And we have a boiler plan too, but that's going to be something we don't run all the time, and we're only going to use it to heat a bunch of buildings at once if we need to. But we can always reduce down to the redundancy of one single fire that doesn't require electricity to heat our water, heat our home, and cook on. And that would save us probably at least a couple $1,000s of propane every year. And that whole model I've been planning for a while, but I admit I watched a friend of mine, Ben Falk. He wrote a book called The Resilient Homestead. Great book. And he talks about his firewood setup, and he did a workshop on it recently. I had him on my Twitter Spaces last Wednesday, or this Wednesday, I should say, a couple days ago. And his system is really, really dialed in, very inspiring, and very wanting me to get mine a little bit tighter and further down to that redundancy. So I have a wood cook stove planned for that house. I bought it actually, but I kind of bought the wrong one, especially after seeing him do his setup. And so I'm changing some things on this, but either way, I thought I would share this little setup because it is kind of neat and it does reduce the handling. And firewood is really you want to handle it as little times as possible. I mean, there's something blessed about firewood and doing the work, and they say, you know, all that work is good for you, which it is. But there comes times in the winter where you just want to chill out and you don't want to have to schlep firewood all the time, or do it less, I should say. And so I've been really happy with this setup, because then I only have to load this every 2 days, and for the greenhouse one, once a week maybe. And yeah, and it's great. It's easy. And basically it's just a box built with 2x4s, plywood on the back. But what I do if I rebuild them, and I didn't do this when I first thought about it, I did put skis down here to get under the skid, or under the dolly, the foot of my dolly. But I didn't do it wide enough. So I just added some chunks of 2x4 to get it a ½ inch off the ground, so that the dolly can slide underneath it. But that's basically how it works, and I hope you guys found that helpful. If you did, smash the like, subscribe to the channel, share the videos with your friends, and I'll see you in the next one. If you'd like to learn more about self-reliance, head over to freedomfarmers.com. We're now offering a monthly subscription to access all of our courses, our community, and our Homestead Accelerator program.